Hello and welcome to the show. This is the Sales for the Nigerian Business Person podcast. It's available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple iTunes, or any podcast player of your choice. So subscribe for free when you're done listening to the episode and give me a 5-star review because your peers have me only 5-star reviews. No threes, no twos, and no fours. Today on the show, we're going to be looking at communication skills, mastering the art of storytelling. Now, for those of you who've been listening to the show for a very long while, since the 3 years that it's been up and running and the over 700 episodes, I'm sure you can tell that this is not the typical kind of topic that I would cover. But it was part of the webinar series that I had done over the month of September with EDUFA. And EDUFA is a international student exchange program. They have campuses based in India. They take people off of the African continent, try and expose them to world-class education and world-class working opportunities, remote world-class working opportunities. And so I did a series of webinars over the month of September. I think it was every single Friday in September where I got to talk about things that the students needed to learn to improve themselves, their ability to work with remote people that they were working with internationally, and then also give them skills that will come in handy when everybody decides to go back home. Because it's not one of those relocation things. It's basically you come here, you get the education, you get the work experience, and then you head back home. So we were looking at a number of skills that the students might have found useful when trying to set up a life back home or to continue with this remote working thing. That's for those people who get into the swing of it and are able to build a viable business around their skills. So, communication skills, that was the last one that we covered. If you're interested in knowing what the other episodes were, then just check the podcast episodes that came out in the month of September. Anything that has EDUFA in the title, EDUFA is EDOOFA. So anything that has EDUFA in the title was a part of the webinar series. I think we did 5. Okay, no, we only did 4, although we had 6 possible questions to choose from. So I'll just make one as a bonus episode, I guess, and then just send it off to the EDUFA administrators. So this podcast episode is a summary of what we discussed in the last episode, so that the students who were there could make reference for this in future. And then it was also here so that those of you who've been following the podcast for a while can get to see or hear, rather, some of the good stuff that we happen to discuss at the time. So, of course, communication skills, mastering the art of storytelling. Okay, so the first question that we addressed was, what is communication? And I tries to tease out a tension inherent in that word communication, which is that a lot of people, when they say communication, they just mean information dissemination. That is talking at someone. So there's me over here on the podcast, and I am talking at you. So, for those of us who went to school in this part of the world, in Nigeria, that's what we were taught pretty much. Communication is passing across information. But there's a missing element, especially when we look at things from a business and a sales perspective. And that is that whatever it is that we're passing across, whatever information we're passing across, is not just for information's sake, but it's usually because we want to get a desired result. So, communication, once you leave primary school and once you start playing with the big boys and the big girls, is not just about passing across information, but rather it's also about the desired result that you're going to get at the end of the day. So, communication now becomes something that is not one way, me talking to you, or me talking at you, or me talking down to you, but rather communication is now something that becomes cyclical. So there's you, the founder, sorry, not founder, the sender. By the way, I'm not sure if cyclical is the right word. I think cyclical is coming back every year or periodically. But anyway, you get the whole point. Communication doesn't go in a straight line. It goes sort of like a circle back and forth. So it starts with you, the sender, thinking about ways to encode your message, and then you transmit the message. It gets over to the other person, and the person has to decode the information and try and figure what it is that you're talking about. If you decoded the information correctly, even if you did it incorrectly, hopefully there's going to be some feedback on some response, and that is going to allow you to suss out whether this communication attempt was effective or not, and then you can begin the cycle all over again. That's the point where you say, oh no, actually what I meant was this, or what I was requesting was that. So that is the true communicating path. It's not straight, it's in a circle. It's going round and round, or at the very least, it's going from me to you, and then from you back to me, and then over and over again. Now, with this model of communication, you can see that decoding is absolutely critical. It's a critical path for communication because our listeners, our audiences, they all have different backgrounds, different contexts, different biases, things like that. So you can say exactly the same thing to two different people, but because they have different backgrounds, context, biases, and things like that, it can rub both of them off the wrong way. Same messages, if you encode it the same way. So let's say you're going to send it over WhatsApp message. That's encoding, deciding which mode of communication you're going to use. So you can encode it the same way, send it out. But then people decode it differently, and then the communication that you have received is not uniform. So we have to be paying attention to these sorts of things when we're trying to encode. We're trying to figure out who are we sending it to, what mode of communication is going to work best with them, how might they interpret it given their age, their health, their background, their culture, their profession, their, what have you. And so decoding, critical. Bear that in mind whenever you're trying to communicate with people, whether face to face, over the phone, WhatsApp, or whatever. And then let's see what else. Okay, I've already stressed that communication is what the listener does. Once you get into a business context or a sales context, communication is what the listener does. It is not what they heard. So in other words, if they do nothing, it is safe to assume that you communicated nothing. The only way to know for sure is to try and seek some feedback, to try and figure out what's going on, and that's going to determine what it is that you do next. So in other words, you try to communicate, but there is no communication, then I guess there was no impact and no communication occurred. Now, another question I looked at was whether communication was a learned skill or a natural talent. And that's because in this part of the world, in Africa, there's this thing of the skilled, what would I call them? People back home who are skilled in the village, at communicating, at telling stories or whatever. There are people who seem to have a gift for these sorts of things, gathering people together, entertaining, communicating. We say that a lot in our families. And then, of course, some of that goes on in the West as well. Populist leaders, whether Macron or who else? Trump. Well, back when Trump was the president anyway. And, on and on. So it looks like there's some people who just have a natural flair for that sort of thing. And so some people wonder, is communication a learned skill or a natural talent? And I try to set their minds at ease that, for some people, they might find this to be unnerving, but the answer is both. Because there are some people that do start off with some level of natural talent, but natural talent can always be improved with training. So they go hand in hand. And then again, even if you start off with deficiencies, the example that I gave was people who have, what's it called? Stammer. I think stammer or stutter. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be called nowadays. But back when I was in secondary school, we called that a stammer. And I gave the example of my classmate Solomon, who used to stammer badly. But with the right training, he was able to be a member of the choir and was able to be a member of the school debating team. Now, I am not a teacher and I'm not a professional speech therapist, so I don't know, excuse me, I don't know how they pulled that off to get Solomon to sing in the choir. He was even is it alto? The high male voice. He was like our chief alto singer, and he also was a debater. So I don't know how that happened, but they made it work. So even people who start off with deficiencies, you stammer, and because of your stammer, your stammering, your stuttering, you're shy. I mean, training can push you past the hump. So it's a little bit of both. There's natural talent and there is training. So focus on the learned skill components That is learning about elocution, pronouncing, standing, posturing, stuff like that. Focus on public speaking, how you frame your ideas, how you compose your ideas, how you identify audience needs, things like that. If you focus on all that learned stuff, you become much more better over time. So don't worry if you try something now, you send an email or you stand up in front of a stage or whatever, and you seem to suck. It's okay. It takes some learning. It takes some getting used to. I mean, it happens. I mean, my first, okay, well, not my first, but I was involved in TV back when I was a youngin, because my father was with NTA. That's the Nigerian Television Authority. That's the public broadcasting corporation over here in Nigeria. Sorry, one moment. I have to attend to something. Okay, sorry about that. The house is being cleaned at the moment, and they needed my attention for something, to find something. Okay, where was I? Okay, yeah, so I think I was on whether communication is a learned skill or a natural talent. Yes, and then how you should focus on the learned skill components. Okay, yes, I was trying to say that this thing, it takes a while, so don't worry if you don't hit it out of the park the first time. And I was going to share a story about when, so back when my father still worked in NTA. So the NTA, that's the public broadcasting corporation in this part of the world. And the minister at the time for the FCT, the Federal Capital Territory, the military administrator was, I think, Gado Nasco, I can't remember. And so there was going to be this party, and children were going to perform and stuff like that. And I was supposed to perform a poem on Abuja. And I think I understudied this guy who used to be a star at the time. I think his name was Bassi. There were two of them. There were real stars. There was Cynthia, I think Cynthia Bride Facinte, I think. And Bassi, I can't remember his surname. So I was Bassi's understudy. But then Auntie Nkem, the lady who used to do Tales by Moonlight, she decided that, I was going to do the poem, and I thought I was good to go. And I went there. I stood in front of the microphone. The cameras were rolling. And I said the first word in the poem. I said Abuja, and then my mind went blank. It felt like I stood there for an eternity. Eventually, Auntie Nkem came, nudged me off the stage. Bassi finished. He received a round, standing ovation and all that. And I felt like absolute crap. And I thought my world had ended. I wanted to die because I thought I had made a fool of myself on national TV. But, that was back then. I've had some more time. Now, I don't memorize anything. I'm more of an extemporaneous speaker. So long as I have the ideas lined up in my head, I'll be fine. No matter how many cameras or no matter how many people. And I found my stride, and things are good. I'm not perfect, but things are getting a lot better. So don't worry if you crash and burn massively like I did. The saving graces, all the mistakes that we make in the early days, nobody's paying attention really. So at the time, I thought I had made an absolute fool of myself in front of the whole world. And maybe I did, if that part was televised. But the thing is, everybody goes on with their life, and people have forgotten, and you've never heard of that incident, and you're probably never going to meet, meet anyone who would remember that incident. If at all that part was televised. I didn't confirm from my father if that part was on air. Anyway, the most important skill when it comes to communication is identifying your audience needs. When you're on stage, you need to be able to figure out what the audience needs to hear from you. If you're talking one-on-one, sending a WhatsApp message or an email, you also need to be keyed in to the audience needs. That's what's going to make storytelling effective. Then there was also the question of whether communication is an art or a science, and it's similar to the question that we just finished, because if communication is an art, then it's a matter of personal flair and personal style. But then, if it is a science, then communication is going to be a systems-based thing, which is A plus B plus C plus D is going to give you the required result. So which is it? Is it a matter of personal flair that with the right looks, with the right hair, with the right dressing, with the right sense of style, I can pass across the message? Or is it a matter of, regardless of what my sense of personal style and flair is, but if I have the right formula and I say 1, 2, 3, and 4, then the result is going to be 5. And the answer also is both. Systems help. The whole thing of say this before you say that and you get that result, it definitely helps. because it helps with the narrative, it helps with story structure, and it helps you stay on track, which is most important. Because if you go there with personal flair and you're freestyling, after a while, you've just been going all over the place and people are not sure exactly what it is you're doing. For instance, as I was at a party recently, my cousin who likes entertaining, unfortunately, he had a little bit too much to drink, and he picked up the microphone and he started beautifully, about the tragedies that we had suffered as a family, where we're coming from. We were celebrating the birth of another baby in the family. So, the tragedy that we're coming from and the progress that we seem to be making as a family. And he started beautifully on that note. But then 5 minutes later, people were wondering, where exactly is this guy heading to? And then one of my older cousins had to, just take jabs on him, get him off the stage, try and focus him. And anyway, that's how they save that. So, systems help. If you have a structure in your head that says A plus B plus C equals to D, then sure, do that plus your personal flair and you're going to be fine. Now, if you remember, the question that we're looking at today is two parts. One, looking at not just communication, but storytelling. So what is storytelling? Storytelling, different definitions, of course, but no matter the definition that you choose to follow, you'll find one thing in common. That storytelling has a sequence of events or narratives that are woven together. And the goal is to communicate some action or some insight or to get people to a point of transformation. So as you can see, it's similar to what communication is in the business context, because if you have a sequence of events, if you have a narrative, you have a beautiful story, but there is no action, insight, or transformation, there's no point to the story. People are going to hear it, and then people will say, nice story, but this story is kind of pointless. What am I supposed to do with that? So stories also need to have a point as well. Now, why should we bother with storytelling when we engage in communication? And we should do that because storytelling is emotive. Oh, by the way, sorry, forgive me, because I'm conscious that I'm breathing heavy into the microphone. That's because, the cold is still there, and the chest infection and all that. So it makes me go out of breath from time to time. But don't worry, hopefully this should be over by next week, and you wouldn't have me breathing down your ears in every single episode. So, storytelling. Yes, why storytelling? Because it's emotive, it engages the emotions, it helps to achieve buy-in, people buy into your story, people have a personal stake in the story. It also makes it easy to retell. And if people are emotionally engaged and they can retell the story a whole lot easier, they're able to pass on the information. The whole thing is memorable. So there are lots of advantages to storytelling. And then how to use storytelling. Of course, I told the young ones in Edufa that you can use it in different contexts, either in business or in your career. You can use storytelling to explore case studies. That's how things were done in the past and the best way to go about doing something. You can also use it to explore use case scenarios. That is to show how your product or your service ideas, can be best applied. That's something that those of us who are in business can do very well. So if you sell washing machines, it would be nice for you to come up with nice stories so that, before the customer leaves, instead of telling them that, look, use this washing machine at 98 degrees centigrade for colored products and only use brands that have 20% chloride. That's a lot of information to tell someone as they're leaving your store, that use this washing machine at 98 degrees centigrade, only use detergents that have chloride, and then let's see what else. Anyway, basically all those kind of information that you would pass along. But if you told it in the case of a story and said, Oga, Madam, thank you very much for buying this, but please remember, there was one of my good clients who bought this machine, but what this guy did was he was only using cold water to wash his clothes. And when he was using cold water, he was only using this brand of soap. And on top of that, he added bleach. The thing destroyed his clothes. The problem was not with the machine. It's just that he was using cold water, was using this kind of soap and this kind of whatever. In fact, his best suit was in the washing machine. It destroyed it, and he had to buy another suit that was worth 150k. So, Oga, as you're going home, tell wifey when she's using this thing, or the other way around. Wifey, as you go home, tell your husband, tell everybody else, when you're using this thing, use it on this setting. This is the best. Use these particular kinds of soap. or else people are going to be spending money replacing your clothes. Madam, I hope you've heard, oh, I've warned you now. That kind of story. The information will be easy to pass across. The lady or the man can now go back home and say, oh, my dear, when I bought this thing, this is what the guy said, and tell the story. Passes across the information instead of saying, my dear, the man said 98 degrees centigrade when we're washing, and to only use soap that has chlorine inside and not to use bleach. That's harder to remember. Then, yes, okay, you also use stories to give warnings and things to be avoided. And in the different contexts, whether in the office or in the church or whatever, or in the community, stories can be used to advance a cause or an agenda or any initiative in your school, your career, in politics, local community, blah, blah, blah. Then, finally, I looked at storytelling frameworks, and also from a sales and business development perspective. And the simple frameworks that I exposed to was when you start off with a situation, that's story, story, story. Once upon a time, there was a boy who lived in this village, or there was a girl who lived over here, that sort of thing. So you explore the solution, you say what the situation is, you say what the problem the key actors were facing, you say what the insight or the information that they needed or the intervention that happened that now led to victory and they were able to overcome. And then you close the story with an invitation to do the same. So you can start off, with the situation and explore the problem, or you can do it the other way around. You can start off the story showing, the main people and the vision or the goal or the destination that they were heading towards. But the narrative arc is still the same. You either start with the problem or you start with where they wanted to go to, and, you say what the obstacles were, the thing that brought insight or transformation, and what the victory was like, and then an invitation to do the same. Now, an invitation to do the same or a call to action is absolutely important, because if you don't have this at the end of the story, you just have beautiful storytelling, but no communication has occurred. So you need a call to action at the end of the story. You don't just stand up at the department meeting, you give a wonderful story, and then you sit down. You give the wonderful story, and then you say, look, Mr. Chairman, or my dear colleagues, if we want to make sure that we grow the business this year by 20%, this is what we have to do, because that is how that's how they achieved it the last time. Or, Mr. Lady Chairperson, if we continue down this line for the department, this department is going to lose X amount of revenue. So we should avoid it, just like, people in last year or last committee or last whatever, in the story. So call to action that you can use at the end of the story. In the business context, of course, there's buy now, or join this community, or do ABC or XYZ, so that we can move this community forward, move this agenda forward, move the organization forward, also that we can avoid this. Politicians, they always talk about support me in achieving blah, 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 in building a new Nigeria, in making Nigeria great again. That's another call to action used at the end of the story. So stuff like that. So that was it, pretty much. The final session that we had for people in the International Student Exchange Program in India, in EDUFA. So, in summary, if you have a wonderful story, but it doesn't compel the person who heard it to do anything, then you have communicated nothing. So, communication, wonderful story. If people don't do anything, then no communication has occurred. So, that's it all for today, folks. If you love what you've been hearing on the podcast, then hit me up on 080-6466-2140. You can call, you can SMS, you can WhatsApp, you can Telegram. The country code is +234. For coaching and consulting, if you need help with making sure that your communication initiatives, whether in the church, whether in the office, whether in the business, you want to be sure that your communications program is working out right, or you guys think you need help with crafting compelling storylines for your different products or services that you have available, hit me up. Stuff that I can help you out with. Remember, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, on your social media of choice. My name is Tavishima Ayede. Don't worry about the spelling. You can confirm the spelling on the website where you're listening to this podcast episode right now, or the profile of the podcast app where you're listening to my voice. My email address is also going to be wherever it is that you are trying to confirm the spelling of my name. assuming you're one of those people who prefers to send emails instead of calling, WhatsApping, or texting. So thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next episode.